I'm Lieutenant Colonel Julie Armstrong, 39, and I built my Air Force career from the ground up. No shortcuts, no famous last name to open doors. For years, I showed up for my family, especially my father, a retired Navy captain who thought I'd taken the easy route. But when he introduced me at his own gala as his failed experiment, then watched his Navy SEAL protege salute me and whisper my classified call sign, everything changed. Have you ever been underestimated or humiliated by someone who is supposed to be proud of you? Tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before we get into what happened, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to stand your ground after being dismissed, hit like and subscribe for more true stories about boundaries, respect, and quiet redemption. What happened next might surprise you. I was 22 when I joined the Air Force, and my father didn't speak to me for 3 months. Not because I'd enlisted, that would have been fine. But because I chose the Air Force over the Navy, his Navy, the only branch that mattered in the Armstrong family legacy. He was a captain then, '06, commanding respect in every room he entered. I was just another lieutenant trying to prove I existed outside his shadow. By the time I made lieutenant colonel at 39, I'd spent 17 years doing exactly that. My call sign was classified. My missions were redacted. My record was sealed behind clearances my father would never hold. He knew I worked in operations. He assumed I pushed papers and coordinated logistics from safe distances. He told people I'd gone soft, chosen the easy path, traded real military service for air-conditioned offices and PowerPoint briefings. He wasn't entirely wrong about the PowerPoint. But he was wrong about everything else. The gala invitation arrived 4 weeks before the event. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, my father's defense contracting firm hosting a donor evening at the Ritz-Carlton in Arlington. 200 guests. Joint Chiefs attendance expected. Media coverage guaranteed. The note inside was handwritten, "Julie, would mean a lot if you came. Been too long. Dad." I almost declined. My schedule was full, my patience for his world was thin, and I'd learned years ago that his invitations came with expectations I couldn't meet. But Colonel Marissa Vega, my immediate superior and the closest thing I had to a mentor, caught me staring at the invitation in my office at Langley. "Your father's thing?" she asked, leaning against my doorframe. She was 52, '06, and had survived 3 decades in a service that still struggled with women in combat roles. She didn't miss much. "Yeah, you going?" "Considering it." She studied me for a moment, then shrugged. "Sometimes showing up is enough. You don't have to perform for him." But I did. I always had. Even when I stopped trying to earn his approval, I was still performing the role of the daughter who didn't need it. The composed one. The professional one. The one who smiled politely when he made his jokes about flyboys and desk jockeys, who nodded when he talked about real warriors and real sacrifice, who never once corrected him about what I actually did. I RSVP'd yes. The dress uniform came out of the garment bag 2 days before the event. Air Force blue, service dress, ribbons arranged in perfect rows. I'd earned every one of them, some in situations I still couldn't discuss, even with colleagues who held similar clearances. The uniform fit well. I'd kept my weight steady since my academy days, still ran 5 miles every morning at 0500 hours, still maintained the discipline my father had drilled into me before I was old enough to question it. He'd started my training when I was 6. Timed runs around the neighborhood. Push-ups in the backyard. Lectures about duty and honor and the warrior ethos. My mother, when she was still alive, used to say he was preparing me for something. After she died when I was 14, his intensity only increased. I was his project. His legacy. The daughter who would prove that Armstrongs were born for service. Then I chose the wrong branch. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom was exactly what I expected. Crystal chandeliers, round tables dressed in white linen, a stage at the far end with a podium and projection screen. I arrived at 1800 hours, early enough to avoid the crowd, late enough that my father would already be occupied with guests. The security checkpoint was thorough. This was a defense industry event, after all, with enough brass and classified contractors in attendance to warrant proper protocols. I spotted him immediately. Richard Armstrong, 56 now, still carrying himself like he was on a quarterdeck. Retired Navy captain, current CEO of Armstrong Defense Solutions, a firm that had grown from a small consulting outfit to a major player in tactical systems development. He'd built it through connections, competence, and the kind of aggressive confidence that either impressed people or exhausted them. He was holding court near the bar, surrounded by men in expensive suits and a few officers in dress uniforms. I recognized a rear admiral, a Marine colonel, and several civilians I knew from intelligence briefings. My father was laughing at something, his voice carrying across the room, and I felt the old familiar tightness in my chest. The one that said I was about to be evaluated, measured, and found wanting. I moved along the perimeter, greeting people I knew, accepting champagne I wouldn't drink. Dr. Elaine Carter found me near the silent auction tables. She was civilian intelligence, mid-40s, and one of the few people outside my chain of command who knew the shape of my actual work. "You look like you're calculating exit routes," she said. "Always. Your father's been talking about you." "I'm sure." She gave me a sympathetic look. "It's not all bad. He mentioned you're stationed at Langley now." Seemed proud. "He thinks I work in a basement reviewing flight schedules." "Do you?" "Sometimes." She smiled. "Well, for what it's worth, you look extremely competent standing next to that auction basket." I managed a laugh. It felt good. Real. I was about to respond when I saw my father approaching, threading through the crowd with purpose. His eyes were bright, his smile wide. Performative. He was in host mode, which meant I was about to become a prop. "Julie." He pulled me into a brief hug that felt like a photo opportunity. "Glad you made it. You look sharp." "Thanks, Dad. Congratulations on the event. Impressive turnout. Wait until you see the keynote. We've got some exciting announcements tonight." He glanced around, then lowered his voice slightly. "I want you to meet someone. My new senior strategic advisor, Commander Nathan Holt. Navy SEAL, multiple deployments, exactly the kind of operator perspective we need on the team." There it was. The son he never had. I'd heard about Holt in our phone calls over the past year, the ones that had grown increasingly perfunctory. My father talked about him the way he used to talk about me, back when he still believed I'd follow his path exactly. "I'm sure he's very capable," I said. "More than capable. The man's a legend in the teams. 3 combat deployments, Silver Star, Purple Heart. He's the real deal, Julie. The kind of warrior this country needs." "Unlike me," was the unspoken end of that sentence. I kept my expression neutral. Years of operational discipline made it easy. "Looking forward to meeting him," I said. My father's attention was already shifting, pulled by another guest, another hand to shake. He squeezed my shoulder once, a gesture that might have looked affectionate from a distance, and moved away. Dr. Carter had diplomatically vanished. I stood alone near the auction tables, watching my father work the room, and wondered why I'd come. Then the lights dimmed for the presentation, and I took my seat at a table near the back. Far enough to observe. Close enough to fulfill my obligation. The perfect distance I'd maintained for 17 years. The keynote began at 1900 hours sharp. My father took the stage with the easy confidence of a man who'd briefed admirals and closed deals with defense secretaries. The projection screen lit up behind him, Armstrong Defense Solutions, then a montage of tactical systems, naval vessels, special operations imagery. Professional. Polished. Designed to impress. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight." His voice filled the ballroom without strain. Command voice. I'd grown up hearing it across dinner tables and parade grounds. "We're here to celebrate not just Armstrong Defense Solutions, but the partnerships that make our national security possible. The relationships between military excellence and private sector innovation." Applause rippled through the crowd. I kept my hands still. He walked through the company's growth, recent contracts, new technology initiatives. It was competent. He'd always been competent. That was never the problem. The problem was that competence in his world required validation, witnesses, recognition. Private achievement didn't count. If no one saw it, it hadn't happened. "Tonight, I want to talk about legacy," he said, and I felt my shoulders tense. "About what we pass down to the next generation. about the values that define service. The screen changed to a family photo. Me at 23, fresh from the academy, standing beside my father in his navy whites. We were both smiling. I remembered that day. It was taken at his change of command ceremony, right before his retirement. He'd been proud then. Or I'd thought he was. My daughter Julie is here tonight, he continued, and every head in the room turned. I kept my face neutral. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel. She's had an interesting career path. Chose to go Air Force instead of continuing the family's Navy tradition. Broke my heart a little, but he paused for the laugh and got it. We Armstrongs are resilient. More laughter. My jaw was starting to ache from staying relaxed. Julie decided she preferred working behind the scenes. Operations, coordination, strategic planning. Important work, don't get me wrong. Every mission needs its logistics experts, its support personnel. Not everyone is built for the sharp end of combat, and that's fine. We need all types in the service. The words landed like precision strikes. Delivered with a smile. Packaged as affection. But everyone in this room knew what he was saying. Everyone understood the hierarchy he'd just reinforced. I was the failed experiment. The daughter who chose wrong. The Armstrong who couldn't cut it in the real Navy, who'd settled for something easier, something safer, something less. Dr. Carter caught my eye from across the room. Her expression was carefully blank, but I saw the anger there. She knew. Some of the other officers knew too. But their knowing didn't matter. My father controlled the narrative, and the narrative said I was a disappointment dressed in a respectable uniform. He continued talking. Something about his new strategic advisor, about bringing operational experience into the corporate environment. The screen showed Navy SEAL imagery now. Desert operations. Maritime insertions. The kind of visible heroism that photographed well. And speaking of operational excellence, I want to introduce someone who embodies everything we value at Armstrong Defense Solutions. My father's pride was unmistakable now. Genuine. The kind I'd spent decades trying to earn. Commander Nathan Holt couldn't be here for the start of tonight's program, but he's joining us now. Nathan's been advising us on tactical systems development, bringing real-world experience to our design process. He's the kind of warrior who makes everyone around him better. The ballroom doors opened at the far end. A figure in navy dress whites entered, moving with the economical grace of someone who'd spent years in high-stakes environments. Commander Nathan Holt. Early 40s, compact build, the kind of quiet presence that suggested competence rather than advertising it. He walked toward the stage, acknowledging the applause with a slight nod. Professional. Controlled. His gaze swept the room in what I recognized as automatic threat assessment, the ingrained habit of someone who'd operated in hostile territory. Then his eyes found me. He stopped mid-stride. The color drained from his face. For 3 full seconds, he stood completely still, staring at me with an expression I'd seen before on operators who'd just recognized something they didn't expect to see in a safe environment. His voice carried in the silence, quiet but clear enough for the tables near me to hear. Black Widow. The name hit the room like a flashbang. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. My father's champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered against the stage floor. The sound echoed in the sudden quiet. Commander Holt continued staring at me, his face cycling through shock, recognition, and something that looked like reverence. Around us, the civilians looked confused. But the military personnel in attendance, the ones who'd operated in certain theaters, who held certain clearances, who'd worked with certain joint task forces, they weren't confused at all. They were looking at me differently now. Reassessing. Recalculating. Connecting a call sign they knew with a face they'd dismissed. My father stood frozen on stage, looking between Holt and me, trying to understand what had just fractured his carefully constructed narrative. His mouth opened, closed. For the first time in my life, I saw Richard Armstrong at a complete loss for words. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. The truth was already spreading through the room in whispers, in sharp intakes of breath, in the sudden rigid attention of officers who'd just recognized a name from classified briefings. Black Widow. The call sign that belonged to the Air Force combat operations officer who'd spent 3 years attached to special operations in Helmand province. The one who'd coordinated the air-ground strike package that dismantled an insurgent network responsible for 17 Allied Kias. The one whose targeting analysis was still taught in certain classified courses at Hurlburt Field. The one my father had never been cleared to know about. Commander Holt seemed to remember himself. He straightened, then crossed the remaining distance to my table with purpose. When he reached me, he came to attention and saluted, a Navy SEAL commander saluting an Air Force lieutenant colonel in a ballroom full of civilians and contractors. "Ma'am," he said, voice steady now but still carrying that note of deep respect. "It's an honor." I returned the salute, keeping my movements precise and minimal. "Commander, I worked the Helmand operation in 2017. Joint Task Force. You coordinated our air support for the Valley clearance." He wasn't asking. He was confirming. Making sure he had the right person. "Saved my team when we got pinned down outside Marja. We called for CAS, got your voice on the net, and 10 minutes later we had Apaches and fast movers turning that entire ridge line into a parking lot. 0 friendly casualties." The precision was he stopped, seeming to realize he was getting into operational details in front of an uncleared crowd. "It was textbook, ma'am." I gave him a slight nod. "Glad it worked out, Commander." He looked like he wanted to say more but recognized this wasn't the place. He glanced toward the stage where my father still stood, then back to me. Something passed across his face, understanding, maybe, or disappointment. He nodded once more, then moved toward the stage to complete his entrance. The ballroom stayed quiet. My father managed to recover enough to continue his introduction, but his voice had lost its certainty. The rest of the keynote passed in a blur of words that didn't matter anymore. The performance was over. The curtain had been pulled back. I stayed seated, maintaining the same composed expression I'd worn all night. But inside, something had shifted. Not triumph. I'd never wanted this kind of exposure. Not vindication. I'd never needed his audience to know my worth. Just a quiet settling. A recognition that the gap between his version of me and the truth had finally, irreversibly, become visible. When the keynote ended and people began moving toward the reception, I stood and walked toward the exit. No announcement. No goodbye. Just a clean extraction from an operation that had completed its objective. Dr. Carter intercepted me near the coat check. "You okay?" "Fine." That was, I know. She studied my face, then nodded. "You want company for the drive home?" "I'm good. Thank you, though." "Julie." She waited until I met her eyes. For what it's worth, I'm glad someone finally said it out loud. I managed a small smile. Wasn't my choice. No. But it happened anyway. She squeezed my arm once, then let me go. Outside, the November air was cold and clean. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting my shoulders drop, feeling the tension drain from my neck and jaw. My phone buzzed. 3 texts already, 2 from colleagues who'd been at the gala, 1 from my deputy commander asking if I needed anything. I didn't answer any of them. I just walked to my car, started the engine, and drove back to my apartment in Alexandria. The whole way there, I kept my mind carefully blank, focusing on traffic and navigation and the mechanical tasks of driving. It wasn't until I was inside, door locked, uniform hung up properly in the closet, that I let myself actually process what had happened. I stood in my kitchen in my workout clothes, staring at nothing, and felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Not satisfaction. Not revenge. Just relief. The weight of carrying a secret that contradicted every assumption my father had made about me, the exhausting discipline of never correcting him, never defending myself, never once saying, "You're wrong," it was lighter now. Still there, but lighter. I made tea. Sat on my couch. Looked at my phone and saw 17 missed calls, 12 from my father's number. I didn't call back. Not yet. Maybe not for a while. There wasn't anything to say that the truth hadn't already said for me. The morning after the gala, I woke at 0500 hours like always. Muscle memory and discipline, 2 things my father had actually managed to instill correctly. I ran my usual 5 miles through the dark streets of Alexandria, came back, showered, and dressed in my operational camouflage uniform. Wednesday. Staff meeting at Langley at 0800 hours. Business as usual. Except my phone showed 43 missed calls and 62 text messages. I scrolled through them while drinking coffee. Most were from my father. Increasingly agitated voicemails that I didn't listen to. A few from colleagues expressing support or surprise or just checking in. One from Commander Holt's official email address. Ma'am, I apologize if I caused any issues last night. Would appreciate the opportunity to speak when you have time. Respectfully, CDRN, Holt, USN. I archived it without responding. Not yet. The one message I did read fully came from Colonel Vega. Heard about last night. My office. 0730. Before the staff meeting. Not in trouble. Just want to check in. I arrived at Langley at 0700 hours. The security checkpoint was routine, the walk to my office building familiar. Nothing had changed in the physical world. But I felt the difference in how people looked at me. Word traveled fast in the military, faster still in the intelligence community. By now, everyone who mattered knew that Black Widow wasn't just a call sign in a classified file. She had a name, a face, and a father who'd publicly called her a failed experiment 12 hours before learning the truth. Colonel Vega's office was on the 3rd floor, corner position with windows overlooking the parking lot. She was already there when I knocked, door open, drinking coffee from a mug that said "Fly Fight Win" in faded letters. Close the door, she said. Not unkind, just direct. That was Vega's way. I sat across from her desk. She studied me for a moment, then leaned back in her chair. So, she said. Black Widow. Yes, ma'am. I knew you'd done Hellmand. I knew you'd been attached to Special Operations Task Forces. I even knew you'd earned a call sign, though I didn't know what it was. Compartmented information, need-to-know basis, all that. She paused. I didn't know your father had no idea. He never asked. And I was never cleared to tell him. Even now. The operational details are still classified. The call sign itself is FOIO at most. But the specific missions, those are staying sealed. Vega nodded slowly. Your father's been calling the front office. Wants to speak with you. Wants to speak with your chain of command. Wants to understand what happened last night. What did you tell him? That you're in active duty 05 with a full schedule and you'll contact him when and if you choose to. And that we don't discuss personnel matters with family members, regardless of their connections. She took a sip of coffee. He wasn't happy. He rarely is. Julie. She set the mug down, her expression shifting to something more personal. You've been under my command for 2 years. You're one of the best officers I've worked with. Calm under pressure, excellent tactical judgment, able to coordinate across branches and agencies without ego getting in the way. You make my job easier. She leaned forward. But I've also watched you carry something heavy. Something that made you more guarded than you needed to be. Last night, whether you wanted it to or not, some of that weight got lifted. How are you actually doing? I considered the question. Really considered it, which was more than I usually allowed myself. I don't know yet, I said finally. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. I wasn't trying to embarrass him. I wasn't trying to prove anything. But it happened anyway. Yes, ma'am. And now you have to decide what comes next. Vega stood, moved to the window. Your father's going to want an explanation. He's going to want to control the narrative again, reshape it into something he can live with. He might apologize, or he might double down. Either way, he's going to make demands on your time and energy. She turned back to me. You don't owe him anything you're not willing to give. He's still my father. Yes. And you're still the officer who earned that call sign. Both things can be true. But you get to decide which one matters more in any given moment. The staff meeting was routine. Updates on current operations, resource allocation, coordination with other agencies. I delivered my portion of the brief without hesitation, answered questions about upcoming joint exercises, and stayed focused on the work. Several colleagues gave me subtle nods or expressions of support, but no one mentioned the gala. Professional courtesy. We all had secrets. We all understood compartmentalization. Afterward, I returned to my office and finally looked at my father's messages. The voicemails progressed from confused to angry to something that might have been hurt, though with Richard Armstrong it was hard to tell. The texts were shorter, more controlled. Need to talk. Call me. Julie, this is important. Pick up. I deserve an explanation. People are asking me questions I can't answer about my own daughter. That last one almost made me laugh. People had been asking me questions I couldn't answer about my own work for 17 years. Now he knew what that felt like. I typed a response. Dad, I'm at work. Can't talk now. We'll call when I have time. I didn't specify when that would be. 3 days passed. I maintained my schedule, executed my responsibilities, and ignored the growing pile of messages. My father called the front office twice more. Colonel Vega continued to deflect. Eventually, he seemed to realize that direct approach wasn't working. On Saturday morning, a letter arrived at my apartment. Hand-delivered, no postage, which meant he'd sent someone from his company. The envelope was thick, expensive stationery, my name written in his precise handwriting. I made coffee before opening it. The letter was 2 pages, single-spaced. His officer's training showing through, structured, organized, building to a conclusion. He started with the gala, describing his shock and confusion when Commander Holt had recognized me. He wrote about the aftermath, the questions from guests and colleagues, the realization that his own daughter had an entire career he knew nothing about. He used phrases like, need to understand, and deserve to know, and as your father. The second page shifted. He talked about my mother, about how proud she would have been, about how he'd tried to raise me with the values that mattered. He mentioned his disappointment when I'd chosen the Air Force, not because it was inferior, he was careful to say that, but because it broke the family tradition. He'd wanted me to have what he'd had. The brotherhood. The legacy. The pride of service in the world's finest Navy. The last paragraph was closer to an apology than anything I'd ever received from him. I can see now that I didn't know the full picture. That's on me. I should have asked more questions. I should have trusted that you were capable of more than I assumed. I'm asking now, can we talk? Can you help me understand who you've become? I'm proud of you, Julie. I should have said that more often. I'm saying it now. Please call. Dad, I read it twice. Set it on my kitchen counter. Stared at it while drinking my coffee. The thing about Richard Armstrong was that he meant it. Every word. He was proud in his way. He did want to understand. And somewhere beneath the ego and the need for control and the weight of his own expectations, he loved me. But love without understanding had spent 17 years feeling like evaluation. And pride that only came after public exposure felt less like vindication and more like a reminder of all the years he'd been content not knowing. I picked up my phone. Typed a message, Dad. I got your letter. I appreciate it. But I need some time. The work I do is still mostly classified. I can't give you the explanations you want. I can tell you that I'm good at it, that it matters, and that I earned every bit of it on my own. That's going to have to be enough for now. I hit send before I could reconsider. His response came within minutes. That's fair. Take the time you need. When you're ready, I'm here. It was more grace than I'd expected from him. Maybe he was learning. Or maybe he'd simply run out of ways to push. That afternoon, I finally responded to Commander Holt's email. Kept it professional. Commander, no apology necessary. You didn't cause issues. If you'd like to discuss operational coordination or joint service protocols, I'm available for a call next week. Respectfully, Lieutenant Call Armstrong. His reply was immediate. Ma'am, I'd appreciate that. Also want to say, I grew up with a father who didn't understand me either. Took years before we got right. Hope it works out better for you. CDR Holt. I stared at that message for a long time. The presumption of understanding from someone I'd never actually spoken to should have annoyed me. But instead it felt like recognition. A nod from someone who'd traveled similar ground. Maybe that was what happened when you spent your career operating in classified spaces. The people who understood you were rarely the ones you expected. Commander Nathan Holt called the following Tuesday at 1400 hours. I took it in my office, door closed. The kind of operational security conversation that was routine in my world. Lieutenant Colonel Armstrong, I answered. Ma'am. Commander Holt. Appreciate you taking the time. Of course. What can I do for you, Commander? There was a pause, the sound of him choosing his words carefully. I want to apologize properly for the gala. I should have maintained better operational security. Recognizing you as instinct, but saying your call sign out loud in an uncleared environment was unprofessional. You were surprised. It happens. Still shouldn't have happened. I've been doing this long enough to know better. Another pause. But I also want to say I meant what I said. About Hellmand, about the coordination, about the honor. That wasn't just surprise talking. Your work saved lives, including mine. I kept my voice level. That was the mission. You would have done the same. Maybe. But you did it while managing competing priorities from 3 different command elements, keeping air assets deconflicted in a hot battle space, and maintaining communications across 4 frequencies simultaneously. I listened to the tape afterward, during the AAR. You were calm the entire time. Like you were ordering coffee, not calling in danger close strikes. Training. It's more than training, ma'am. I've worked with a lot of checks and combat controllers and air coordination elements. You're in a different category. He hesitated. I also looked you up after the gala. Talked to some colleagues who've worked the classified side longer than me. Your reputation is, well, there's a reason that call sign carries weight. Commander, I know. You can't talk about it. I'm not asking you to. I just wanted you to know that the people who do know, we recognize what you've done. Even if your father doesn't. The directness caught me off guard. Most people danced around the family dynamic, treated it like something fragile that might shatter if mentioned too bluntly. Holt just said it. My father and I are working through things, I said carefully. I'm sure you are. And for what it's worth, he spoke highly of you afterward. Once the shock wore off, he pulled me aside at the end of the gala, asked me what I knew, what I could tell him. I kept it general, told him you'd coordinated air support for JSC operations, that you were highly respected in that community, that your clearances were above mine, so I couldn't provide details. He looked. Holt paused, searching for the word. Shaken. Like he'd been operating on bad intelligence for years and just found out. That's accurate. He asked me to tell him about the Marja operation. Wanted specifics. I told him it was classified, but that his daughter was directly responsible for bringing everyone home alive. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he just nodded and walked away. I processed that. Richard Armstrong, confronted with the gap between his assumptions and reality, going silent. No argument. No attempt to reshape the narrative. Just silence. Thank you for telling me that, I said. Ma'am, I have a request. Somewhat unusual. Holt's tone shifted, more formal. I'm helping develop a training evolution for SEAL tactical coordination with air elements. We're trying to improve how ground elements communicate requirements to air officers during complex operations. I'd like to use your Hellmand case study as an example, with proper classifications and scrubbed details, of course. Would need your permission and probably some input on the teaching points. That would need to go through proper channels. My chain of command would have to approve. Understood. But if they do approve, would you be willing? I considered it. Sharing operational experience for training purposes was normal. Expected, even. But this felt different. More visible. My work had always been behind the scenes, my contributions known only to the people who'd been there. Turning it into a teaching case study meant exposure, recognition, the kind of attention I'd spent my career avoiding. If my chain approves, I said slowly yes. I'd be willing to contribute. Appreciate it, ma'am. I'll submit the formal request through your command. We talked for another 10 minutes about training methodologies, joint service coordination challenges, the usual professional exchange between officers who understood the same operational space. It was easy. Natural. The kind of conversation I had regularly with colleagues who'd worked similar missions. When we hung up, I sat in my office for a few minutes, staring at nothing. Something was shifting. The careful walls I'd built between my public identity and my classified work were becoming permeable. Not broken, I'd never compromise operational security, but permeable. People were connecting the dots. The woman at the gala was the same person who'd earned that call sign. The failed experiment was the proven operator. It should have made me uncomfortable. Instead, it just felt inevitable. Colonel Vega knocked on my doorframe later that afternoon. Got a call from a Commander Holt, Navy SEAL, requesting to use your Hellman coordination as a teaching case study for SEAL training. Yes, ma'am. He mentioned he'd be submitting that request. It's approvable. Operational details would need to be scrubbed and classified appropriately, but the general framework is solid teaching material. She studied me. You okay with this level of exposure? I think so. You don't sound certain. I'm not used to people knowing, I admitted. I've spent my whole career being underestimated. It was easier that way. Lower expectations, less scrutiny, more freedom to just do the work. And now? Now people are looking at me differently. My father's looking at me differently. And I don't know if I want that or not. Vega nodded slowly. I get it. But Julie, you earned this. Not the attention, necessarily, but the recognition. The respect. You don't have to hide anymore just because it was comfortable. It wasn't comfortable. It was strategic. Maybe. But strategy changes when conditions change. Your cover's blown. Might as well use it. After she left, I pulled up the classified file on the Hellman operation. I hadn't looked at it in years. Reading through the after-action reports, the communications logs, the target analysis, it was all still clear in my memory. The pressure. The variables. The weight of knowing that lives depended on getting the timing and placement exactly right. I'd been 33 then, a major, still proving myself in a community that didn't always trust Air Force officers to understand ground combat. 3 teams pinned down in a valley, taking fire from elevated positions, requesting immediate air support. I'd had 8 minutes to coordinate deconfliction, confirm friendly positions, redirect 2 Apache crews and 3 F-16s already airborne, and sequence the strikes to suppress enemy fire without hitting friendlies in close proximity. 8 minutes. 47 lives hanging on decisions made in real time with incomplete information. We'd gotten it right. Every strike landed where it needed to. Every friendly made it out. The insurgent network collapsed within 72 hours. And my father never knew. Never asked. Never imagined I was capable of it. I closed the file and went back to my current work. But something had settled in my chest. A quiet certainty. Vega was right. The conditions had changed. I could either keep hiding behind comfortable underestimation, or I could accept that people knew now. That my work had a face. That Black Widow wasn't just a call sign anymore. The choice felt obvious. I'd spent 17 years proving myself in classified spaces. Maybe it was time to let some of that proof see daylight. My father called 3 weeks after the gala. I was home, Saturday morning, 0900 hours. I'd been expecting it, but the actual moment still made me hesitate before answering. Hi, Dad. Julie. Thank you for picking up. His voice was careful. Controlled. The way he sounded when navigating difficult negotiations. I know you said you needed time. I've tried to give you that. But we need to talk. I know. Can I come by? I'm in the area. I could be there in 20 minutes. Part of me wanted to say no, to maintain the distance, to keep control of the timing and location. But that was old strategy, built on old conditions. Okay, I said. 20 minutes. I made coffee. Cleaned the already clean kitchen. Changed out of my workout clothes into jeans and a sweater. When the knock came, I was as ready as I'd ever be. Richard Armstrong stood in my doorway looking older than I remembered. Still fit, still carrying himself with military bearing, but something in his face had changed. The absolute certainty had cracks in it. Come in, I said. He entered slowly, taking in my apartment. He'd been here once before, when I'd first moved in 2 years ago. Brief visit, just dropping off some furniture I'd inherited from my grandmother. He hadn't stayed long enough to see how I'd arranged things, what my life actually looked like. Coffee? I offered. Please. We sat at my small kitchen table. The silence stretched for a moment, neither of us quite sure how to start. Finally, my father set down his mug and looked at me directly. I've been trying to figure out what to say. Practiced a whole speech in the car. But now that I'm here, it feels inadequate. He paused. So I'll just say it plain. I was wrong about you. For a long time. And I'm sorry. The words landed cleanly. No deflection. No qualifiers. Just apology. Okay, I said, because I didn't know what else to say. I spent years assuming you'd chosen the easier path. That you'd gone Air Force because you couldn't handle the Navy. That you'd picked support roles because you didn't have the— He stopped, shook his head. The toughness. The warrior mindset. I was wrong about all of it. Yes, you were. Commander Holt told me some of what you did. Not details, he said he couldn't, said it was above his clearance. But enough. Enough for me to understand that while I was telling people you pushed papers, you were— He stopped again, struggling. You were doing what I always wanted you to do. You were being the kind of officer I respected. You were just doing it in a branch I didn't respect enough to notice. I drank my coffee, giving him space to continue. The gala, he said quietly. When I introduced you that way, said you were a failed experiment, Julie, I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to make a joke. A bad one, clearly, but I thought we understood each other. That you knew I was proud of you anyway, even if you hadn't followed my exact path. Dad. I set down my mug. You've been making those jokes for 17 years. At dinners. On phone calls. Every time you introduced me to your colleagues. And every time I stayed quiet. Because arguing would have made it worse and explaining was impossible. But that doesn't mean I didn't hear what you were actually saying. What was I saying? That I wasn't good enough. That I'd chosen wrong. That I was a disappointment dressed in the wrong uniform. He flinched. Actually flinched. That's not— I never meant— I know you didn't mean it that way. But that's how it landed. Every time. The silence came back, heavier now. My father looked at his hands, at his coffee, anywhere but at me. I spoke to some colleagues, he said finally. People who have clearances, who've worked in that world. They wouldn't tell me specifics. But they all said the same thing, that Black Widow was someone they'd trust with their lives. That your work was exceptional. That you were— his voice caught slightly. That you were one of the best they'd ever worked with. That's kind of them. It's not kindness. It's fact. And I missed it. I was so busy being disappointed that you didn't follow my path that I never looked at the path you actually took. He met my eyes finally. I'm asking, can you tell me? Anything you're allowed to tell me? I considered what I could share. The broad strokes. The unclassified framework. I specialized in combat operations coordination, I said. Joint strike operations, mainly. When special operations teams needed air support in complex environments, I was the person who made sure the right assets got to the right place at the right time without hitting friendlies. I did that in several theaters over about 8 years. The work required clearances you don't hold, so I can't give you specifics. But that's the shape of it. You were saving lives. I was doing my job. Julie, Dad, I don't need you to be more impressed now than you were before. I didn't do it for your approval. I did it because it mattered and because I was good at it. I kept my voice level. But I do need you to understand something. For 17 years, you've defined success by your standards, your branch, your version of what military service looks like. And when I didn't match that template, you decided I'd failed. You didn't ask questions. You didn't dig deeper. You just assumed. You're right. I don't want you to apologize for not knowing classified information. That's not fair. But I do want you to apologize for not trusting me. For not believing I might be capable of more than you saw. For making me the punchline at a gala full of my peers. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. You're right. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't trust you. I'm sorry I let my ego and my expectations get in the way of seeing who you actually are. I'm sorry I hurt you repeatedly while thinking I was just— I don't know. Being funny. Being fatherly. I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. Years of dismissal couldn't be fixed with one conversation. But it was something. A starting point. An acknowledgement. Okay, I said. Thank you. Can I ask what happens now? Between us. I considered that. I don't know yet. I'm not angry, if that's what you're worried about. I'm just tired. Tired of managing your perception of me. Tired of being careful about what I say and how I present myself. Tired of the gap between who I am and who you think I am. So, what do you need? Time. Space. And maybe you could just accept that there are things about my work and my life that you won't understand, and that's okay. You don't need to understand everything to respect it. He nodded slowly. I can do that. And no more jokes. No more comments about spreadsheets versus flight suits, no more failed experiment lines. If you can't say something genuinely supportive, just don't say anything. Fair. We finished our coffee in a more comfortable silence. Before he left, my father paused at the door. "Your mother would be proud," he said quietly. "She always knew you were tougher than I gave you credit for." "She did. She used to tell me, Richard, stop trying to make her into you. Let her be herself." "I thought I was letting you be yourself. But I was just letting you be yourself within parameters I approved of." He smiled, sad and genuine. She was right. She usually was. After he left, I sat on my couch for a while, processing. The conversation hadn't fixed everything, but it had opened something. Made space where there had only been assumption. My phone buzzed. A text from Colonel Vega, approved the training case study request. They want you to brief it at Dam Neck next month. You good with that? Dam Neck. Naval Special Warfare Development Group, where SEALs trained and developed tactics. I typed back, "Yes, ma'am. I'm good with it." The next 6 weeks passed in a blur of operational tempo and subtle shifts. The formal request from Commander Holt's command came through channels. I spent evenings after work developing the case study presentation, scrubbing classified details while preserving the teaching points about coordination, communication, and decision-making under pressure. Colonel Vega reviewed it personally. "This is solid work. You're essentially teaching them how to think like you think. How to manage complexity when everything's happening simultaneously. That's the goal. They're lucky to have access to this. Most operators never get to see inside the head of the person on the other end of the radio." The briefing was scheduled for mid-December. I flew to Virginia Beach on a Wednesday, checked into a hotel near the base, and spent the evening reviewing my notes. I wasn't nervous exactly. I'd briefed generals and intelligence directors and joint task force commanders. But this felt different. More personal. These were the people who'd been on the receiving end of my coordination. The ones whose lives had depended on my decisions. Dam Neck was exactly what I expected. Professional, secure, focused. I cleared security at 0730, was escorted to a briefing room by a master chief who treated me with the kind of quiet respect that suggested he knew who I was and what I'd done. Commander Holt was waiting inside, along with about 30 other SEAL officers and senior enlisted. Some I recognized from joint operations, most I didn't. They came to attention when I entered. "As you were," I said. "Good morning." Holt stepped forward. "Ma'am, thank you for coming. Everyone here has signed the appropriate clearance acknowledgments. We're ready when you are." The presentation took 90 minutes. I walked them through the Hellmanned operation chronologically, explaining the decision trees, the coordination challenges, the real-time adjustments. I showed them what the air picture looked like from my perspective, how I'd managed competing priorities from different command elements, why certain decisions had to be made in seconds with incomplete information. They asked good questions. Specific, technical, focused on understanding the methodology so they could apply it to their own operations. No one asked about my father. No one mentioned the gala. This was professional space, and they kept it professional. Afterward, several officers approached to thank me personally. A master chief who'd been at Marja said, "Ma'am, I was one of the guys you pulled out that day. Never got to say thank you directly. So, thank you." I shook his hand. "Glad it worked out." "Worked out," he repeated, almost laughing. "Ma'am, you threaded a needle at 300 knots in a sandstorm. That was art." Commander Holt walked me out to my car after the debrief. "That went well. Better than well. You just changed how some of those guys think about air coordination." "Good. That was the point. There's something else." He stopped walking, turned to face me. "Your father reached out to me last week. Asked if we could meet for coffee." I said yes. I kept my expression neutral. "Okay." He wanted to know more about you. About your work, your reputation in the community. I told him what I could without violating classification. But mainly, I told him the truth, that you're respected, that you're capable, and that people trust you with the hard problems. Holt paused. He listened. Really listened. And at the end, he said something that surprised me. "What?" He said, "I spent so long trying to make her into what I wanted that I never asked what she wanted. And now I realize she became something better than I ever imagined. Then he thanked me and left. I processed that. Richard Armstrong, admitting he'd been wrong. Admitting I'd exceeded his expectations. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt like relief. The pressure of his disappointment, lifting. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "Ma'am, one more thing. And this is personal, so feel free to tell me to back off." Holt met my eyes. "I know what it's like to have a father who doesn't understand you. Who measures you against a standard you never agreed to. My dad wanted me to take over his business. Civilian world, safe, profitable. When I joined the Navy, he said I was wasting my potential. Took him 10 years to come to my SEAL graduation. Another 5 before he said he was proud. But he did say it. Eventually. And when he did, it mattered. Not because I needed his approval, I'd stopped needing that years before. But because it closed something. Made it possible to have a relationship that wasn't built on me proving myself." He shrugged. "I'm not saying you need to forgive your father or make things perfect. Just saying, if he's trying, that counts for something." I nodded slowly. "I know. I'm working on it." Flying back to Langley that evening, I thought about my father's comment. About becoming something better than he'd imagined. It was true in a way. I'd built a career outside his understanding, earned respect in spaces he couldn't access, proved myself by standards he didn't set. But the cost had been high. 17 years of distance. A relationship built on misunderstanding. A father who loved me but didn't know me. Maybe Holt was right. Maybe if my father was actually trying now, that counted for something. Not forgiveness. That would take time. But possibility. The chance that the next 17 years might be different than the last. Christmas came quietly. My father invited me to his house in Annapolis for dinner. I accepted, cautiously. It was just the two of us. He hadn't remarried after my mother's death, and his social life revolved around work and military connections. The house was the same as I remembered. Military memorabilia on the walls, photos from his Navy career, everything organized and precise. But he'd added something new, a framed photo of me in my dress blues, taken at my promotion to lieutenant colonel. It sat on the mantel next to his own command photos. "When did you get that?" I asked. "You sent it to me 3 years ago. I kept it in a drawer." He looked uncomfortable. "After the gala, I realized I was hiding you. Hiding the parts of your service that didn't match my narrative. So I put it up. Where it should have been all along. We ate dinner, roast chicken, vegetables, nothing fancy. The conversation was careful at first, both of us navigating new territory. But gradually it relaxed. He asked about my work in general terms, respecting the boundaries. I asked about his company, about the contracts and the challenges. We found neutral ground. Over dessert, he said, "I've been thinking about the business. About succession planning." I'd always hoped. He stopped, corrected himself. "I'd always assumed you'd join the firm eventually. Take over when I retired. But that's not your path, is it?" "No, Dad. It's not. I'm making peace with that. And I'm looking at other options. Commander Holt has strong potential. Some of the other veterans on my team. It'll work out. I think it will. But I want you to know there's always a place for you. If you ever change your mind. Not to take over. Just to be part of it if you want." It was an offer without pressure. An opening without expectation. Progress. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. "But honestly, I'm happy where I am. The work matters. I'm good at it. And I'm not ready to leave it." "I understand." He paused. "Your mother would have understood that from the beginning. She was always better at letting people be who they were." We talked about my mother more that night than we had in years. Her clarity. Her strength. The way she'd held the family together while my father was deployed. The cancer that had taken her too quickly, too young, leaving both of us alone with each other and no buffer. "She would have been proud of you," my father said again. "And she would have kicked my ass for not seeing it sooner." I managed a laugh. "Probably." Before I left, he handed me a small box. Inside was my mother's Air Force pin. She'd served 4 years before marrying my father, something he rarely mentioned because it complicated his Navy-centric worldview. "I found this going through her things. Should have given it to you years ago." His voice was rough. but I think now is the right time. You earned the right to wear it. On your own terms. I held the pin carefully. It was old, worn, real. A connection to my mother's service that I'd never fully known about. Thank you, I said. Thank you. Driving back to Alexandria that night, I felt something shift again. Not resolution exactly, but movement. Forward motion. The beginning of a relationship that might actually be built on truth instead of assumption. My phone buzzed at a red light. Text from Colonel Vega. Merry Christmas. Got word today, you're being considered for 06. Promotion board meets in March. Thought you should know. Colonel. 06. The rank my father had achieved. The rank he'd been so proud of. But if I made it, I'd make it through my own service, my own choices, my own path. I texted back, thank you, ma'am. Merry Christmas. The light turned green. I drove home through quiet streets, my mother's Air Force pin in the passenger seat, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not that everything would be fixed, or that my father would fully understand, or that the past could be rewritten. Just hope that the future might be different. That respect could be earned and recognized. That a relationship could be rebuilt on honest ground. It was enough. The promotion board met in March, but results wouldn't be announced until May. I tried not to think about it, tried to focus on my current work. But the possibility sat in the back of my mind, a weight and a promise. Colonel Vega pulled me aside in April. Between you and me, you're on the list. Confirmed this morning through back channels. Official announcement in 3 weeks, but I wanted you to know. Thank you, ma'am. You earned it. And Julie, you'll be one of the youngest OSIXs in Air Combat Command. That means something. It meant I'd done it. Made rank through capability and performance. Proved myself in the structure that mattered. Without my father's connections. Without his branch. Without his approval. But by the time the official announcement came, I found myself wanting to tell him. Not for approval, I was past needing that. But because he'd understand what it meant. What it took. What it represented. I called him from my office on the day the promotion list went public. Julie, he answered. I saw the news. Congratulations, Colonel. Thank you. I'm proud of you. I know I've said that before, but I mean it. You did this on your own. Through your own excellence. That's worth more than any inherited path. I know. When's the ceremony? July. Probably at Langley. Small event. I'd like to be there. If you want me there. I considered it. 6 months ago, the answer would have been no. Or maybe a reluctant yes, just to keep peace. But now I'd like that, I said. You should be there. The ceremony was scheduled for mid-July, hot and humid, typical Virginia summer. The base chapel, small and formal, filled with colleagues and friends. Colonel Vega would administer the oath and pin on my new rank. My father sat in the second row, wearing a dark suit, watching quietly. The ceremony itself was brief. Vega read the orders, I repeated the oath I'd first taken at 22, and she pinned the silver eagles onto my uniform. The weight of them felt different than any rank I'd worn before. Final, somehow. Settled. Congratulations, Colonel Armstrong, Vega said, shaking my hand. Well deserved. The reception afterward was simple. Cake and coffee in a conference room, people congratulating me, sharing stories, the usual military ritual. My father hung back, letting others have their moment, until most people had left. Can I have a minute? He asked. We stepped outside into the July heat. He looked at my new rank insignia, then met my eyes. I won't take much of your time. Just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. Not surprised, not anymore. Just proud. You've become an officer I respect, and a daughter I'm grateful to know. Took me too long to see it clearly, but I see it now. Dad, let me finish. He took a breath. I spent your whole life trying to make you into something specific. A Navy officer. A version of me. And when you chose differently, I treated it like failure. Like rebellion. I missed the whole point, that you were becoming yourself. Someone capable and strong and worthy of respect on your own terms. I missed years of that because I was too proud and too stubborn to see past my own expectations. He pulled something from his pocket. A small box. Inside were his Navy captain's bars, the rank insignia he'd worn at his own retirement. "These are yours now," he said. "Not to wear, wrong branch, wrong insignia. But as a reminder, you matched my rank, matched my level, did it your own way, in your own service. That's legacy, Julie. Real legacy. Not the kind I tried to force on you. The kind you built yourself." I took the box, feeling the weight of the silver bars, the symbolism he was offering. Acceptance. Recognition. The admission that my path had been as valid as his, maybe more so because it had been entirely mine. "Thank you," I said quietly. "This means a lot. When you make 07, and you will, I'll be in the front row. Not because you're my daughter. Because you're an officer worth watching rise." We stood in the July heat, father and daughter, finally occupying the same ground. Not perfectly. Not without the scars of 17 years of misunderstanding. But honestly, with recognition on both sides. Inside, someone called my name. Another colleague wanting to congratulate me. I turned to go back in, then stopped. "Dad? Same time next week for dinner." He smiled, genuine and warm. "I'd like that." The rest of the reception passed in a blur of well wishes and handshakes. But I kept thinking about my father's words. About legacy. About the difference between inheriting respect and earning it. About the long path from being his failed experiment to being an officer he acknowledged as an equal. Later that evening, alone in my apartment, I set his captain's bars on my dresser next to my mother's Air Force pin. 2 legacies. 2 paths. Both real. Both meaningful. My phone buzzed. Text from Commander Holt. "Congratulations, Colonel. Well earned. If you ever need a good SEAL operator for your next assignment, I know a guy." I smiled and typed back, "I'll keep that in mind, Commander." Outside, the sun set over Alexandria, the sky turning orange and purple. Tomorrow I'd be back at work, same desk, same responsibilities, now wearing silver eagles instead of oak leaves. The work wouldn't change. The mission wouldn't change. But something had changed. The weight I'd carried for 17 years, the need to prove myself to someone who couldn't see me, had finally lifted. Not because he'd changed his mind, though he had. But because I'd stopped needing him to. I was Black Widow. I was Lieutenant Colonel Julie Armstrong. I'd earned respect in classified spaces and proven myself in situations most people would never know about. My father's acknowledgement was meaningful, but it wasn't what defined me. I'd done that myself. 18 months after my promotion to colonel, I received orders for a new assignment, Deputy Commander, 36th Operations Group at Andersen Air Force Base, Guam. Strategic location, high-tempo operations, joint service coordination. Exactly the kind of position that prepared officers for command at the 07 level. Colonel Vega called me into her office the day after the orders arrived. "This is a good move for you. Political, yes, you'll be managing egos and competing priorities from multiple commands. But strategic. Do well here. You're on track for your first star in 3 to 4 years. That's the timeline? That's the trajectory. Assuming you want it." I considered that. General Officer. 07. The level where you stopped executing operations and started shaping strategy. More politics, less direct action. But more influence, wider impact. "I want it," I said. "Good. Because you've earned the shot." She paused. "Your father's going to be insufferable, you know. His daughter outranking his final rank. He'll tell everyone." I managed a laugh. "Probably. Will that bother you?" "No. Not anymore." And I meant it. His pride was his to feel. It didn't define my achievement or diminish my work. It was just his pride. I could let him have it without it meaning anything about me. I told my father about the assignment over dinner the following weekend. We'd been meeting regularly every 2 or 3 weeks, rebuilding the relationship in careful increments. It was easier now. Less performative. More honest. "Guam," he said, processing. "Joint command environment. High visibility. That's a command track position." "Yes. You're going for 07. I'm doing the work that puts me in position for 07. If it happens, it happens." He smiled. "When it happens, not if." He raised his glass. "To my daughter, who's about to outrank her old man." I touched my glass to his. to doing the work that matters. That too. The conversation shifted to logistics, to his business, to family matters. Easy topics, comfortable ground. But before I left, my father said, "Julie, I know I've told you this before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry for the years I didn't see you clearly. For the assumptions I made. For the ways I hurt you without even realizing it. I know, Dad. We've moved past it. I know we have. But I still need to say it. Because you're about to take on a role that will have you leading hundreds of people. And one day, some of those people will have fathers or mothers or commanders who don't see them clearly. And if you remember what it felt like, how much it cost you to keep proving yourself to someone who wasn't paying attention, maybe you can see them better. Lead them better. Make sure they don't have to carry what you carried." I stared at him, surprised. It was the most insightful thing he'd said in years. Maybe ever. "I will," I promised. "I'll remember." "Good. That's all I ask." He smiled. "Now go to Guam. Do the work. Come back with your first star." The move to Guam happened quickly. I packed up my apartment, shipped my belongings, and flew out in late September. The island was humid and beautiful, the base sprawling and complex. My first week was orientation, meeting the command staff, understanding the operational tempo, learning the political landscape. The 36th Operations Group ran combat air operations across the Indo-Pacific region. High stakes, high visibility, constant coordination with Navy, Marine, and Allied forces. I was responsible for training, readiness, and operational execution across multiple squadrons. It was exactly the kind of pressure I'd spent my career preparing for. Within a month, I'd identified inefficiencies in joint coordination protocols and started implementing changes. Within 3 months, I'd improved response times for alert operations and strengthened relationships with naval commanders at nearby installations. By 6 months, the group commander was copying my coordination frameworks to other units. "You make this look easy," he said one afternoon, reviewing my latest operational assessment. "But I know it's not. You're managing personalities and politics I've watched other deputies struggle with for years." "I've had practice," I said. "Years of operating in spaces where I had to prove myself constantly. Teaches you to focus on the work and let the results speak." "Well, it's working. Keep doing what you're doing. And start thinking about what comes next. Because you're not staying a deputy forever." The first indication of promotion consideration came in my second year on Guam. A call from Colonel Vega, now Brigadier General Vega, stationed at the Pentagon. "Julie, how's the island?" "Humid. Busy." "Good. I'm calling about the O7 board. It meets in 4 months. You're in the zone. I've been asked to provide an evaluation by some people who matter. What should I tell them?" "Tell them I'm ready." "I will. Because you are." She paused. "This is happening, Julie. Unless something goes sideways, you're getting your star." I sat with that for a moment. Brigadier General. O7. The rank I'd been tracking toward for 25 years of service. "Thank you, ma'am. For everything. For seeing me when others didn't. For pushing me when I needed it. For stop. You did this. I just didn't get in your way." She laughed. "Call your father. He's going to lose his mind." I did call him. That evening, from my quarters overlooking the flight line. "Dad, got word today. I'm on the list for O7. Results in 4 months." Silence on the other end. Then, "Julie. That's congratulations. That's extraordinary. Thank you. Your mother would be so proud." "Hell, I'm proud. You've done something remarkable. Built a career that matters. Earned respect at every level. And you did it all without cutting corners or relying on anyone's name or connections." "I had good teachers," I said. "Even the ones who didn't realize they were teaching me." He laughed, understanding the reference. "Fair point. Will you let me know when it's official?" "Of course." The board results came through in March. Official notification arrived via my command, formal and bureaucratic. The President has nominated Colonel Julie M. Armstrong for promotion to Brigadier General, United States Air Force. I read it 3 times to make sure it was real. Then I called my father. "It's official," I said. "I made the list." His voice was thick with emotion. "Congratulations, General Armstrong." "God, that sounds good. Not general yet. Nomination has to be confirmed by the Senate. Formality. You're there, Julie. You made it. The confirmation process took 2 months. Background reviews, Senate committee hearings, the full political process. But in May, the notification came, confirmed by unanimous consent. Promotion ceremony scheduled for June at Anderson. My father flew to Guam for the ceremony, arriving 3 days early. I gave him a tour of the base, introduced him to my command team, let him see the operation I'd been running. He asked good questions, listened carefully, and didn't make a single comment about Navy versus Air Force. The ceremony was held on the flight line at 0900 hours, hot and clear. Brigadier General Vega flew in to administer the oath and pin on my star. The 36th Operations Group formed up in parade formation, 300 personnel standing at attention. My father stood to the side, watching. Vega called me forward. I marched to position, came to attention. Colonel Armstrong, you have been selected for promotion to the grade of Brigadier General in the United States Air Force. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I repeated the oath, the same words I'd first spoken at 22, now carrying different weight. When I finished, Vega removed my colonel's eagles and pinned on the single silver star. Congratulations, General Armstrong, she said quietly. Well earned. Your mother would be proud. Thank you, ma'am. She stepped back. My father approached, slow and deliberate. He saluted civilian to general, technically unnecessary, but symbolically powerful. I returned it. Then he pulled me into a brief hug. You did it, he whispered. You outranked me. Outranked everything I achieved. And you did it your way. When he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes. Thank you for being here, I said. Wouldn't have missed it. Not for anything. The reception afterward was formal, speeches and congratulations, the usual military ceremony. But standing there in my new rank, I felt something settle completely. Not just professionally, but personally. The gap between who my father thought I was and who I actually was, it had finally closed. Not because he demanded it, but because the truth had become unavoidable. I was Brigadier General Julie Armstrong. I was Black Widow. I'd saved lives, led people, earned respect through capability and dedication. And I'd done it all without needing anyone's permission or approval. Later that evening, my father and I sat on the patio outside the O Club, watching aircraft take off into the Pacific sunset. He held a beer, I had water, and we sat in comfortable silence for a while. I've been thinking, he said finally, about legacy. About what we leave behind. Yeah. I spent your whole life trying to create a specific legacy. Navy officer, family tradition, all that. I thought that mattered. That continuity was everything. He paused. But watching you today, I realized something. The best legacy isn't the one you force on people. It's the one they create themselves, using the tools you gave them, the values you taught them, but applying them in ways you never imagined. Dad, let me finish. You took everything I taught you about discipline and honor and service. And you applied it in ways I never would have thought of. You became something I couldn't even conceive of when you were growing up. And that's better than anything I could have planned. He turned to face me. You're not my legacy, Julie. You're your own. And that's exactly as it should be. I felt my throat tighten. Thank you. That means more than you know. We sat together as the sun set, father and daughter, both of us finally understanding what the other had needed all along. Not perfection. Not adherence to a specific path. Just recognition. Respect. The freedom to become ourselves. He wanted a legacy that wore his name. He got one that outranked it. And finally, after 25 years of service and 17 years of proving myself, that was enough. That was the night the script flipped, and I stopped performing for the wrong audience. If this resonated, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a boundary check. Questions for you? Have you ever been publicly mocked by family? What did you do in the moment? What boundary would you set now, clarify, distance, or no contact? If you were at that gala, would you have spoken up or walked out? Why? Have you had a hidden resume moment where the truth finally came out? Do you believe respect is earned quietly or demanded loudly? What's one line you wish you'd drawn sooner?